for my voice, but I have never seen anything like it.
Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Welcome back to the podcast. We're breaking down the American League West today. We're starting your week off right. And a very special guest. This is the first time and potentially the only time I'm going to do this. I'm going to have a guest come on to talk about the division with me. We're bringing on not only a close friend of ours, but a guy that's going to be covering the Texas Rangers this year, Brenden Snow. You might remember him from the last show. We had him on a handful of times to talk about LSU and a bunch of other things. But now he's an actual writer, so we're going to bring him on one more time to talk about the American League West. Brenden, how's it going?
It is great to be back, Andrew. We feel like we've been on a handful of different podcasts together going back, Riding the Pine, some year other podcasts, and here we are on a new one. We're both still doing our thing, and we've both been getting better at what we do, and that's why we keep doing it.
Yeah. All right, so this division's a very interesting one to me because there's a clear-cut favorite, and then there's about three teams that I think could potentially be major disappointments for what they have. So the Astros are the clear-cut favorite. They're at minus 250 to win the division. Clearly one of the highest odds to win the division. Then you got to look at the Angels, the Athletics, and Mariners. Your Texas Rangers are plus 1,500 to win the division. Their over-under is 76.5. So we'll start with the Rangers because I want to let you flex your muscles a little bit about your team here. I have the over. I think the Rangers are going to be pretty good this year, if not above 500 at least. What are you feeling right now about the Rangers?
Yeah, I kind of think that's the general feeling that we have too over here. Last year they finished 78 and 84, just under 500, and they were expected to be a much worse team. They went out the offseason. They weren't super aggressive, but they were a little aggressive, picking up some back-end pitching for the rotation, which last year it really felt like they only had two starting pitchers, and then the other three starters were bullpen games every week. It was Mike Minor, Lance Lynn, and that was it. But now they traded for Corey Kluber. They signed Kyle Gibson, Jordan Lyles, a bunch of guys who can just come, eat up some innings, which they need, kind of help save that bullpen, which the bullpen itself needs to get better. I think I'll be writing something on that this week coming out on my website, Overtime Heroics. But if the bullpen can be better, the back-end starters can just be serviceable. They definitely have a chance to be around a 500 team. And we saw the offense explode last year for the Rangers. I think the offense will still be good again if Joey Gallo stays healthy. We're going to have Willie Calhoun there all season instead of just half the season. Ruben Odor can just be something, better than a 220 hitter.
So I want
the
to
Rangers can be all right.
I want to talk about the pitching because getting Kluber, I think, is a big deal. I don't think enough people made enough of it at the time. I don't buy the hype. I've seen a couple publications say that the Rangers could be a sneaky wild card team this year. I'm not willing to say all that. I will, however, say that I think they're moving in the right direction. They opened up a new ballpark this year. From the photos I've seen, it looks very nice. It's a very beautiful ballpark. I think it's a big upgrade from their last ballpark. So I think that they are a franchise that's moving in the correct direction. And to be completely honest with you, they're one of maybe four franchises that are doing that right now that if aren't competing for a title this year or aren't competing for a playoff spot are going to set themselves up in the next 4 or 5 years to be in that conversation.
Yeah, and the Rangers, they don't have a dominant farm system right now, but they have some decent guys in the farm system, especially a lot of guys who had to kind of step up and play last year and get some innings in the big league because of so many injuries they faced and just lack of arms they had. They had to bring up, 22, 21-year-old pitchers, get some experience now, let them go back in the minors this year, learn from what they did from their time in the big leagues, refine the mechanics and get all that figured out. Because, like I said, the pitching is the main thing in the right direction. That's what killed the Rangers last year. They were a great offensive team, but really struggled keeping other teams from scoring. And I think they made that a point of emphasis this year. They make the trade for Kluber, which really didn't have to give up too much. I didn't think so, giving up Delino to Shields, who very inconsistent kind of guy, but had speed and was a solid defender in the field. But the Rangers feel like they have other guys who can give that to them. And giving up the minor league relief pitcher Emmanuel Clase, a guy who can hit 102 on the radar gun. I saw it a few times last year. He can get up there, but he just really raw power arm and really needs to be worked on. I think he actually already got hurt for the Indians too. The Rangers trying some things. Even some people don't notice they picked up Cody Allen on a minor league deal. He was regarded as one of the best closers in the league a few years ago. That's something they could use back in a bullpen guy because Jose Leclerc was so inconsistent at times last year.
I think it's interesting because you mentioned Odor. He's the player to watch. If you haven't listened to the podcast before, I do a player to watch for every single team. Odor is the guy that I have my eyes on for the Rangers because he's either going to be an all-star this year or he's not going to be on the team come July. I don't think there's any split decision there. It's either going to be all in or all out, I think, for the Rangers with Odor. If he can't figure out how to hit at least a 275, 280 clip this year, I think that he's going to find his way out of Arlington.
Yeah, man, I can tell you the Ranger fans have been done with Odor for halfway through last season because just the inconsistency. And he'll show these flashes for 2-3 weeks where he'll get on an extremely hot streak. He'll be getting on base. He'll be smashing balls to the deep right field. But then he can't really come on and hit the contact. He's kind of an all-or-nothing guy. His fielding isn't great at second base. Last year, the Rangers brought in Nick Solak kind of later in the season, trading for him from Tampa Bay. And he was a second baseman when he came in. Now with the Rangers, he's been kind of a utility guy. And I thought he had a real chance to kind of push Odor for that second base job because Solak played very well at the end of last season. But Chris Woodward and John Daniels, they pretty committed to Odor after the contract they made a few years ago. So he's going to have another shot at least this year. I think he's got a little shorter leash, but he'll have a chance to redeem himself because there's not a lot of options really for him to.
I think they're going to move off of him if he can't figure out how to hit. All right, so, Brenden, that is the one team in the division that I have high hopes for. The rest of the teams in the division I'm not completely sold on. So let's go back and talk about the Houston Astros, who they had the scandal. We can split hairs on that if we want to, but they have been getting beamed every single spring training game. I think they've had 80 batters hit so far this spring training. I know that I've already given my long monologues on this before on this podcast, so I'm not going to make the listeners hear another one. But for you, a Rangers fan, how nice is this that the Astros are getting their comeuppance for cheating?
Yeah, it is kind of, I don't want to say adorable to back watch people get hit by the ball, but it's the way baseball works. It polices itself, and it's not the most dangerous way, because they're not throwing with the intent to hurt players. They're just throwing to kind of tell them, hey, don't do something like that again. And we don't respect it. The Astros are still going to be a very good team this year. I don't think any doubt about that, even without Garrett Cole. They still got plenty of pitching. They've got every year a couple of MVP candidates, and Bregman, Altuve, if Correa stays healthy for a year. They're a deep team, so they should be runaway favorites to AL West. I think they will be. But then what comes down is how long of Astros. My question now is how long are the Astros going to be the dominant best team in the AL West? Losing a few draft picks in the next few drafts for the penalty, the big fine. Players may be less inclined to come to the organization, find their as free agents. Yeah, the future of the Astros is what intrigues me. But I think the next year or two, maybe 3, when they still have all these guys under control, they'll be all right.
So my deal was, first off, they're over-under set at 96 games, and I think that's going to be the under. You lose A.J. Hinch, one of the better managers in baseball. I think that you're going to struggle out the gate to figure out what you're going to do with this team. Like, without the guy who's been leading the team for the last, 5 years, without that guy, I don't think the Astros are going to come out of the gates very hot, and that's why I have the under. I think they're going to struggle in the month of March and April. They'll figure it out by, say, May, June, July-ish, and then they'll be able to cruise to about 90 wins. But 96 wins to me feels like a very high number for a team that I think they're going to struggle in the first couple weeks.
Yeah, I can definitely see that because, like you said, you lose your manager who has so much control, you lose your GM even, and even the catching for the Astros. They lost Robinson Chirinos. He came back to the Rangers after leaving the Rangers for 1 year to Houston. He's back in Texas, so now the Astros are rolling out Martin Maldonado as their everyday starter at catcher. Maldonado's 33, and never been too much of a big hitter. He's a solid, behind the plate game caller, but he's not the guy who's completely changing the game. And when you're losing the coaching aspect from losing your previous manager, and now you have a different catcher back there with your pitchers, it definitely can cause some troubles early in the season.
And then you mentioned Garrett Cole leaving to the Yankees, the rival of the Astros at this point. I think those are the two teams that most people have their eyes on in the American League. You lose Garrett Cole, the guy that was able to have the best ERA and opponent batting average for American League pitchers last year. I think that's going to take a real big deal. And then, of course, Wade Miley. That's 372 innings worth of pitching gone off your rotation. I think that's going to hurt. Now, this is a player to watch for the Astros. I say George Springer, because he has slowly, I think, turned into the most underrated player in the American League. This guy, I think, could be an MVP candidate if he was on any other team. If he was playing for the Kansas City Royals, I think that we would be saying, wow, the Royals have a face of a franchise-type player. But because he sits behind Altuve and Correa and Bregman and even Verlander to be a face of the franchise, he's never going to be the front and center guy, I think, of the Astros. I think he's always going to be a behind-the-scenes type of dude. But he is a legitimate star in this league, I think, if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, even being an Astro hater, I've always been a fan of George Springer because I can respect his game. Being that leadoff guy, I like his leadoff style. He'll get kind of weirdly reminds me almost of Ian Kinsler, the way he led off. So many leadoff home runs, can get on base, can steal bases. Really, you can put him anywhere on the lineup, but just having him lead off adds so much more because it puts the other team pitcher under pressure immediately. George Springer hit almost 300 last year and nearly 40 home runs and 100 RBIs out of the leadoff spot. So if he was moved to a 3-hole behind Bregman and Altuve or behind anybody, so he could get more guys on base, he would definitely be an MVP type player.
All right, and this is the first hot take I've had out of these podcasts. We did the American League East and the AL Central. Those are both up on the podcast page. My hot take, Brenden, was I think this is the biggest arrow or biggest dead eye on a franchise's back maybe ever. People forget that the Red Sox and Nationals won the last two World Series. Everybody's focusing on the Astros this year. People forget the Dodgers and the Yankees are the favorites to come out of their divisions and favorites to come out of the American League and the National League to play in the World Series. Everybody's eyes are on the Astros, and I think rooting for their demise. Would you agree that this is probably the biggest, dead eye on a franchise in baseball in our lifetime, at least?
Yeah, I can't think of much more that gave as much attention to a franchise. We had the whole the steroid scandals is more player driven. Whether it was Alex Rodriguez, no one blamed the Rangers or blamed the Yankees organization. They blamed the player. This is such an organization-wide thing, definitely drawing more interest at all angles because, they came in and had to suspend the manager and GM first, and then the owner makes the decision to fire them. You have players coming out and turning on, feeling like turning on their own team. Mike Fiers being called a snitch by, players like David Ortiz. So definitely created a lot of turmoil in there. And I haven't seen much more, like the franchise get this kind of attention because that was an excellent point saying no one talked about how the Nationals and Red Sox won the last two World Series. We've just been talking about the Astros 2017 World Series now for the past few months here in 2020.
No, so 96 wins. I picked the under. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely think they lost some, and I think losing your manager, losing GM, losing Garrett Cole, because Garrett Cole was almost MVP last year. That's how dominant he was as a pitcher.
What's a bigger loss?
Take a step back.
What's a bigger loss, AJ Hinch or Garrett Cole?
I'm going to go with Garrett Cole, just because he could single-handedly kind of win you games with how well he could pitch on the mound. I know he only pitches, he'd only start maybe 30 games if he's fully healthy, 30, 33 games a year. But I think the manager is just a little bit more replaceable rather than getting that kind of production from anybody else because Garrett Cole is that dominant.
All right, let's move on to the Los Angeles Angels, the most disappointing team in, I think, professional sports. They're plus 600 to win the division. Their over-under is 84.5. I have the under. I think this is going to be another embarrassing year for the Angels. Look, you got a guy like Mike Trout. You have a guy like Ohtani, who I wasn't super high on. I'll give you a credit here, Brenden. You were high on him from the start. You thought that he was going to be a type of generational player. He went down last year with an elbow injury, but he showed to me, at least in that short time that they had him, that he was a legit guy. You know, coming off Tommy John surgery is nothing to play with, but out of spring training, we're already hearing that he's faster than Mike Trout. He's be able to hit the home runs in BP better than anybody else outside of Trout. Ohtani feels like, to me, the type of guy that you want to watch on Sunday Night Baseball week after week. But the problem is that the Angels play on the West Coast, and they also play in a division that's going to be run by the Astros, and they have one of the worst teams, I think, in baseball for the star power that they have.
Yeah, looking at the Angels, they get Anthony Rendon, absolutely huge, to kind of really solidify in the middle of that lineup, but there's not a lot of depth with the Angels. They have you look at the top, it's Mike Trout, it's Rendon, it's Ohtani, and then it feels like it's a big drop-off. Justin Upton's not the same player as we've seen before. Simmons is more of a fielder at shortstop, but he can get hot a little bit. Tommy La Stella had a little bit of a breakout year last year, but you don't know if that's replaceable. He can do that again. Albert Pujols, at this point, I think he's just chasing home run leaders. I don't know how much he's giving to the team. Helps them win games, and the pitching staff always struggles because the Angels, they get hurt and they just don't have depth. They picked up Julio Severin from the Braves. They go get Dylan Bundy from the Orioles to kind of try to bolster the rotation a little bit and get some depth, but there's just not a lot of depth with it. The bullpen struggled a lot last year, and even, like I said, it's not very deep. The catcher, the outfield, not too many big names out there other than the 3 or 4 already named. The interesting part is them finally moving on from Mike Sosa. They moved on from Sosa, they moved on from Osmus, and now they're on to Joe Madden as manager.
Well, we'll see if Madden has anything to change about this team because, look, they haven't had a winning season since 2015. They haven't made the playoffs since 2014. That's a long time for a fan base to show up. And I get Mike Trout being a generational superstar, and I get Ohtani and Rendon being guys that you can buy their jersey. But, look, if you're not giving me a winning performance on the field, I'm not going to the games. There's a lot of things to do in LA besides go to see the Angels play. In fact, there's another team that might win the World Series this year playing in that same area, the same market. So I think the Angels, by far, to me, are the most disappointing team in the American League because of the star power that they've had and the lack of success they've had. Do you agree?
Yes, because even without any other names, just having Mike Trout alone, and not really being able to get to the playoffs much really at all in his prime is really a loss for baseball and for fans.
Like at least Bonds was going to the playoffs when he was with the Giants. At least he played in the World Series. Look, Trout's had maybe 3 playoff games in his career. He's only had a handful of at-bats in his career. So when I say the 84.5 games, I'm taking the under on that. I think they're going to have another bad year in LA. Let's move on to the Oakland Athletics. This is a team that has everybody's number, it seems like. This would be the team, if there was a team to compete with the Astros to win the division, I'm taking the Oakland A's. How do you feel right now about the A's? How do you feel right now about their over-under at 89.5? Almost a 90-win team.
Yeah, that's interesting because what's made the A's kind of what feels like so good in the past is that we've always had such low expectations. We haven't really came in and given them expectations like this for 90 wins in any of these seasons in the past few years, and we've seen them a few times and sneak into the playoffs. They get on these hot streaks. They're very just under the radar team that don't get talked about much. They have really good players, but now with the expectations on them, can they still produce at that same rate? They have some players I think are legitimate stars in the league. Matt Olson,
Chris Davis,
Marcus Semien, Matt Chapman is quietly one of the best third basemen in baseball. Marcus Semien was an MVP candidate last season. They just had a lot of guys who just kind of go out and do their job. And that's what kind of makes them a quiet team. They don't have the flashiness with them, but they just go out there and take care of business.
I said Oakland and the Angels are connected at the hip because they both have different problems. The A's have a problem with not enough the A's have a problem with not enough star power. They don't have enough offensive production. They got guys like Jesus Lorenzo, a young lefty who I think is going to do something special this year. I think he could be an all-star in the American League this year. They have a problem with not enough run production. They're going to be one of the best rotations in baseball. Are they going to be able to score enough runs? Because if your rotational ERA is 2.3, 2.5 in that area, and you're not scoring 2 runs a game, you're not going to win a lot of games. And I don't think that the A's have that type of firepower to win a lot of slugouts if they're playing the Twins, if they're playing the Yankees, if they're playing even the Red Sox to a certain extent. If they get into a battle of we need to score more runs, they're not going to win that fight. But if they get into a rubber match, I think the A's have the best chance. 89.5 wins, I'm taking the over. I think that this is going to be the team that's going to push the Astros all the way to the last week of baseball. The Astros aren't going to be able to take their foot off the gas come September. They're going to be having a gun for it if they want to not even make the playoffs, but win the division.
Yeah, and the A's, what they do, you're talking about not having big power and star power. They play small ball. They will do what they have to do, just scratch across and run, steal. They run the bases really well. They field really well. They want to keep the other team low scoring so they can just eke out a few runs to beat you. I still think 89 is a little high for the A's. I really don't hate the A's, but I don't know about getting 89, 90 wins. I can see them above 500, 84, 85, 86 wins. But I think just the American League has kind of a lot more better teams all around now than it did last year. Last year was kind of top heavy. I think the whole American League division or conference is deeper.
All right, let's move on to Seattle, the last team in the division. Also, potentially the worst team in the division. Their over-under is set at 65.5 wins. I'm taking the under on that one, Brenden. Seattle had a tough time last year due to injury, but now that the Nationals have won the World Series, they're one of the last franchises without a World Series ring. To add insult to injury, though, Mr. Snow, I'm going to add something for you. 18 years since they've made the playoffs. 18 years of Mariners fans without going to the playoffs or winning a playoff series. That's got to hurt.
Yeah, and especially when it was 18 years ago and they were a playoff team, they had the best record ever in the regular season and then lost it all in the playoffs. And kind of opposite the Rangers. You said the Rangers go in the right direction. Every time I look at Seattle, I'm not sure what exactly they're doing. They have kind of a lot of middle-aged guys, not old guys, not super young players that are going to become stars. They're kind of trapped, it feels like, in that loop of not having young stars, of trying to bring in some older guys to try to stop gap. And it just has not been working out for them.
I like Evan White and Kyle Lewis, two of the promising young prospects they have in their farm system. Everybody's talking about that these two could be cornerstone players. I want to mention something about King Felix, though. Felix Hernandez played his final season with the Mariners last year. He is in spring training right now with the Atlanta Braves, so I'm very curious to see if he's able to make that switch over to the National League.
I would love to see King Felix Hernandez still pitching in the MLB. He was such a treat to watch. I've watched him dominate the Rangers for a decade. He's one of those Ranger killers as a player, just personally. He always came out and gave his best stuff. There's a reason we call him King Felix, because of how dominant he can get. I'd love to still see him pitching and, really help out a Braves team that could be on the cusp of doing something.
And you can hear about the Braves on Friday when we do the NL East preview. Let's talk about the player to watch, Brenden. I had Marco Gonzalez, who is a young starting pitcher. He's a lefty. He pitched a couple innings last year for the Mariners, but they didn't really want to bring him up and use him a ton. I think that they're going to really lean on him this year in that starting rotation to be a guy that's going to be an impact player on this Mariners team. But like I said, this is a team that's going to lose a lot more games than they win this year. It's going to take a long time, and nobody wants to watch crops grow, but everybody wants to enjoy the fruits of their labor. So I think that this is a team. You mentioned that I think the Rangers are on the fast pass lane to figuring everything out and getting in the right, getting where the franchise needs to be in the right ballpark of where they need to be. The Mariners are a couple steps behind of the Rangers, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, and then what it comes down to with the Mariners this year are if they're not going to be a really competitive team when it comes to deadline. Do they go full sell mode? They have veterans they could sell off. Kyle Seager, I think teams would take D. Gordon's running ability. Malik Smith, he's still kind of young, about 26-year-old outfielder, but he stole I think nearly 40 bases last year. He just 46 bases last year. Extremely fast guy who teams could look at for help come the playoffs. So that's something. Carl Edwards Jr. in the bullpen, Taijuan Walker, Marco Gonzalez, all guys I think will be names we see coming up around the trade deadline.
All right, let's just do a real quick recap. I have the Astros winning the division. I think the A's are going to be the team that's going to get the wild card out of the division. I think they're going to both be fighting for that divisional crown all year long. The Rangers are going to be a team that's going to be in the right direction. Mariners a couple steps back. I think that the Angels are going to have the worst record in the division this year, and that's going to be a real shame because they're going to have the best star power, I should say. Brenden, real quickly, thoughts on the division as a whole?
I think it'll be a better division at least than we've seen the last few years. Last year the Rangers finished much better than we expected them to, and I think they can do that again. I think the Angels are going to be an improved team. And then I think the Astros and A's kind of stay afloat. Like you said, still finishing 1 and 2. I think just comes a lot closer. I think the games are more competitive. Everyone's just trying to take turns fitting up on Seattle. I hate Astros being the clear-cut favorite, but I think they are. And it'll take a lot, for a team to overthrow them unless they're just having too much problems, facing the Boo Birds all year or, the problems in the clubhouse or injuries or whatever. It's going to take something major like that to overthrow them.
All right. Tell us a little bit more about where you are writing right now, Brenden.
Yeah, so I just jumped on with Overtime Heroics. Kind of new website starting up a little bit. I've been around for about a year. But I'll just join on as the Texas Ranger beat writer. They cover all sports from everything. I'll be focusing on the baseball side. So you can follow them on Twitter at baseball_OTH, baseball Overtime Heroics, or the main page, just OT Heroics. You find it in my Twitter at bsnow97. Like I said, I'm working on an article right now, focusing on the Rangers' kind of pitching situation. I think it's going to be we have a bunch of writers for Rangers this year, so I think my main focus would be pitching. That's something I'll be looking deep into. If you want more insight on that, I recommend checking out my stuff.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on, Brenden.
Man, you know it, anytime.
Thank you again to Brenden for coming on the show. Thank you guys for checking it out. You remember the podcast can be found everywhere, including Google Play, the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So wherever you listen, thanks for checking us out. We have Television Tuesday coming out tomorrow. Today, we also have an NBA shoot-around episode that's out. We talked about Selection Sunday, what we can expect with Connor Grohl on Sunday afternoon. So that podcast is out right now as well. And NL East preview, that's going to come out Friday, where we're going to talk a little bit about Yasiel Puig and why he isn't signed yet, and the Atlanta Braves, why you should favor them in that division. All that and more on Friday. So continue to check in with us all week. We're going to have content for you. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.